block from stream.
Hey, welcome to another edition of Mental Health Happy Hour. My name is J.R. Reed from Not Weird, Just Autistic. With me is Jason Cotton, the bipolar DM. How you doing?
Hello, I'm doing good.
Good. And just to let you know, we've got a great guest today. His name is Rick Clemons. He is a coming out coach. We'll let him explain a little bit more about that. So let's go ahead and bring him on.
Hey, JR. It's great to see you again,
Rick,
man. It's been a while.
Yep.
All is good, man. And it's been great. And I'm really excited to be having this conversation with both you guys and just diving in and talking about how similar all these aspects of mental health are to coming out of whatever closets there are in your life. So
that's right. Well, why don't you explain a little bit about your background and how you started doing what you're doing?
Yeah. So, surprise, surprise, I came out of the closet and suddenly there you go. I had a whole business starting to open up around me. I wish it was actually that true, but it kind of was true. I came out of the closet late in life. And as I was working through all of that, there were obviously lots of hills and valleys and blocks and all that sort of stuff that were showing up in my world. And I started realizing, hey, I was doing some of this really, really well, and I was doing some of this really, really bad. And the more I started to lean into, okay, well, what am I doing well? I started getting other people asking me, hey, how are you doing this? And at that time, I was like hating what I was doing for work. I was vice president of marketing for a software company. And I was like, wonder if I should be doing something else. And that wasn't the first time I was already having those questions. Even before I came out of the closet, I was like, I want to be doing something else in my world. And it's really interesting when I work with people coming out of the closet, we may start in that space of exploring their sexuality, trying to figure out if they really are gay, bi, trans, whatever it might be. And as we do the work, then something else shows up in their life. For me, something else that showed up in my life as I came out of the closet was, hey, I wanted to lose some weight. I wanted a new job. There's always something else that's kind of tied to this, but there's those other pieces that come along. And I finally took the big leap in 2009 to say, I'm going to switch everything up, and got certified as a life coach, spent 18 months getting that all pulled together, and have been working as a coach ever since. And now I have the really big blessing of not only coaching people coming out of the closet, but I've coached entrepreneurs to help them build their businesses. I've worked with people who are having relationship issues, you name it. The closets are endless that we're in our lives. So that's kind of how I got going.
Absolutely. You know, and that's the one thing I was going to ask you about mention is you're working with people that are not just LGBTQ. You were telling me another time that a lot of entrepreneurs who want to get out of the corporate world that they've been in for so long and start their own business.
Yeah. And it's interesting because it is a closet, you know, so many people sit there in their worlds and like, I'm miserable. I hate what I'm doing. I don't know how to do what I want to do. And they'll sit there and they'll sit there and they'll sit there. And if you take the metaphor of the closet, then they're stuck in their closet of staying in a miserable job or staying in a miserable relationship or staying in an unhealthy body because they're like, I just don't think I can get out there and exercise and do what I need to do. So I utilize the parallel of coming out of the closet to help other people get to that place and to that world where they want to be.
Yeah. And, you know, the thing is, we don't think about all those other things necessarily as coming out of the closet.
No, they don't. You know, and what's interesting too is when and I don't come at this from like, hey, this is because I'm the coming out coach. This isn't about just being gay and stuff. It's like really stepping from that space and saying, so what is that thing that is most important to you? That you keep walking up right to the precipice of, okay, yes, I want this, or I'm going to go do this, or I want to walk away from, a situation. What is that thing that keeps showing up in your world time after time after time that if you just finally took the leap would change everything for you?
Right.
That's kind of the big thing.
Yeah. Jason, I've been talking a lot. Do you have any questions or anything to say?
How did you get into the life coach aspect of the industry? I mean, I've real bit funny. I've been just seeing ad after ad on Facebook about life coach this, life coach that, and not that it's something that I'm interested in, but for anybody else that's been seeing those kind of ads, how do you get into it? Get into it.
So there's tons of ways to get into it at this stage. When I went through it back in 2009, coaching was still somewhat of a kind of newer modality. However, in 1996 was the first time I actually got exposed to coaching, and I had a coach clear back in 1996. At this stage, one of the best ways for people who are exploring it would be to go to International Coach Federation and get on their website, look at the ICF certified programs. Those are the ones that I personally recommend, just because there's a rigor that they've gone through to be certified as a life coach or coach training school, whether it's a school, a program, whatever. There's certain standards that ICF holds to be true. Yes, there's lots of online, go through this, watch these 10 videos and you can be a life coach. And I'm not knocking those, but it's a modality of mental health, and we're not held to the same standards as therapists and psychologists and doctors, but through ICF we are held to a level of ethics and how we conduct business, how we approach it. So for instance, if somebody came to me, and I'm going to use you guys as an example. Yeah. And if JR had come to me and said, hey, I'm really struggling with these sort of things, and given, the challenges he has in his own mental health, there would be a certain level I could work with JR to, but knowing the other challenges that he has or has learned to navigate through life, I would at some point say, hey, this is not my specialty. And I think he'd be better served by being with a therapist. And it can be, so for instance, let's just take a true coming out story. So if somebody comes to me and they're like, yeah, I think I'm gay, but I don't know. I think there's something wrong with me. There's got to be something wrong with who I am physically. And okay, that's not where I'm going to go as a coach. I may play with it a little bit, but if they keep coming back to there's something wrong with me, I think there's something wrong with my head, in my mind, I want them to go work with a therapist to unpack the piece of there's something wrong. Now, if they came to me and said, I used to think there was something wrong with me. Now I figured out, no, I'm just feeling like I'm gay, but I'm not quite sure how to navigate coming to that truth and opening up and owning that. That's a whole different ballgame, because they're saying I used to be there, or I've never thought there was something wrong with me about being gay. I just need some help, like owning it, being confident, stepping into it. How do I navigate this? That's what a coach really is good at. Like, we're starting at point A, we're trying to get you to point B. It's forward momentum. There's always going to be some homework and stuff that we work on and keep it moving forward. And again, I think the two modalities actually work really nicely together. Therapy and coaching can be an amazing mix. In fact, I just landed a new client last night who is doing therapy as well as he wants to use me as his coach, because there's certain things from a coach he's looking for. Number one, he's a guy who's been married in a heterosexual marriage, has 2 kids. So there's a like experience. He's like, I don't have that with my therapist, so I'm not going to give him advice per se, but what I can give him is, hey, here's what I've observed as I've worked with other guys who've been in heterosexual marriages, come out of the closet. Similar thing, like if I'm working with an entrepreneur. There's a lot of entrepreneur stuff that shows up where I can say, well, here's my lived experience. Now let's dive into what is it that you're trying to create? Why is this important to you? What will be different for you as an entrepreneur if you achieve this? What things are not working? So there's a piece of it that I become the business coach. Now, if somebody says, I really want to hire you as your business coach, that's a whole different ballgame too. Because I'm like, okay, here's how I've done social media. Here's how I've created a podcast. Here's how I've done the marketing. That becomes more of a coaching consulting sort of space rather than coaching, where coaching in my mind is about truly forward momentum and helping my clients find the best answer for them. So even last night with the client that I started working with, one of the things that we went for immediately is like, how would you, knowing what you know right now, best like to define where being gay fits in your life? And he said, I've never thought about that. And I said, well, that's because we're going to take a holistic approach. And by the time we had got done with that conversation, he had really honed in on, I'm going to work on, like, what does it look like for me in my career? What does it look like for me as a father? What does it look like for me as an ex-husband? What does it look like for me for in a future partnership or with a boyfriend? What does it look like with, so he was able to, like, start to see the holistic approach.
Okay.
Right. And that's what I think is so important, Rick, is that, I mean, there's a series of questions, some may change, between person to person, but you've got a generalized set of questions, that people have to think about and answer for themselves,
right,
before they can make the decision on what's best for them. Is that right?
Yep. And the thing is it's very similar to therapy in that in the moment as the coach, you're thinking, okay, what did JR just say? What can I use from what he just said to, like, so here's something you just said, JR. You said that, you're really struggling within yourself to, like, own, this is my mental health, but I recognize that. But what would you like to do now that you recognize that? What would be something that you want to do? Having that awareness that you can now say, because I now recognize this, now I'm capable to see that doesn't affect this. Because what I'm trying to get you to do is, okay, you own this piece, but what is it now you've been trying to do that we can say this really has no bearing? Or if it does have bearing on it, how can you, when you step into owning who you are, be comfortable and own that part of yourself, but not let it be the thing that holds you back? Right. And what would it be like when you're not held back? What does that look like beyond for you?
And I think it all comes down to the word stigma. I mean, there was a much worse stigma about the LGBTQ community before. Now people are a lot more accepting of it, but there's still some stigma around it, just as there's stigma around mental health.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, I have someone in my own family who is bipolar, and the stigma that shows up for that is just, it's crazy. In fact, I actually have a student in one of my coaching programs that in the company that I work for who is bipolar, and she's a teacher, and she wants to get out there on the speaking circuit and start talking about this, but nobody in her workplace knows this about her. And so she's petrified. She's like, I'm afraid if they know this, what's going to happen? And so we've been doing a lot of navigating, like, well, why is this important to you? If you get to be out there and speaking on this and having your impact in the world, what's that do for you? And she's starting to gain the confidence and, like, this is so important to me. It's her passion. It's her purpose. It's what brings her alive. And that's part of what coaching is about too, is like getting you to that space where it's so important. I mean, even this podcast for you guys, it's like it's putting yourself out there in a brand new way, exposing yourself, and truly, being who you want to be. In fact, last night I was on I do 2 group coaching calls, freebies that I do each month. One of them is for gay men over 40, and then the other one is for guys coming out of the closet. And I said something last night. I said, oh gosh, I hope somebody caught that, because I'm leading the thing, right? And I said this quote that I'd never even came out of my mouth. Well, luckily, one of the guys who attends, he sent me a message this morning, said, hey, here's what you said you want, wish somebody had captured. And I think this really says it about whether it's coaching coming out or about mental health or business, is the more we allow our vulnerability to be present, the more present we can be with our vulnerability. And this to me is like the essence of everything. Because if we don't allow that vulnerability to show up as personal, our business, what we want in relationships, we can never be fully present in our vulnerability.
Yeah. And, from one of the last times we talked, you have another little catchphrase that you like to use. And I actually have that on a Post-it note on the edge of my computer. And I ask myself, or I remind myself about that several times a day. Do you remember what that quote was?
I have done so many, JR.
Make your quirk work.
Work. Exactly. I wondered if that's where you're going, but I wasn't 100% sure.
Yeah. Make your quirk work.
Yeah. And I think that's the beauty of what we do when we come out of the closets of our lives. We make our quirks work. We truly step out and let everybody see us. In fact, since you and I last talked, the core brand, as everything has grown and, you know, things have gotten bigger for my life and stages and speaking and podcasts, we really honed in on this thing. Like everybody used to say, okay, so you're the coming out coach, but you're trying to be more than just the LGBTQ coming out guy, right?
Right.
So we really struggled with this until one day we really landed on what I know that I'm capable of helping people do is live a no fears, no excuses, no apologies life. Because to me, that's the essence. Whether you're bipolar or you're autistic or you're overweight or you're struggling to be out of the closet or you want to be CEO of your own world, but you're stuck in cubicle of somebody else's CEO world. It's when you break through and you live by no excuses, no fears, and no apologies that you truly step into living your fullest, truest life for yourself.
Yeah. Jason, do you have anything?
Yeah, I was wondering on for somebody that's wanting to come out with about their mental illness, what would be some of the things they need to take into consideration, before before they break out?
Yeah. That's a great question, Jason. And what I always start with is really look at where coming out about your mental health is causing you confusion. Like what's driving the confusion about whether you should or you shouldn't? Because in that confusion, what we've got to step into is getting really curious with ourselves and starting to ask the deeper questions. If I come out, then what? If I'm honest about who I really am, how does that affect me? How does that affect those around me? Part of what we're doing in that curiosity phase is we're trying to get deep into what is the thing that's not aligned within ourselves. And sometimes it's just a bunch of stories, Now let's kind of go back to the teacher that I was just talking about with the bipolar. She has a real fear, a real fear that something might happen. Part of that is probably justifiable, but in the end of the day, we don't know. We don't know. So the story is what's running rampant because we haven't done that yet. So in this curiosity phase, when we start exploring and asking ourselves questions, what would I gain by being out about my mental health? How would I personally feel more alive if I could just be authentically who I am and honest about how I show up in the world? If you start feeling that little bubble of energy and spark and like, okay, even relaxation, what I've learned so many times over the years is as somebody starts to just even a little bit move into that space of starting to ask the questions and getting curious and starting to feel the answers they're starting to get back, the confidence starts to build. And they also start to realize the more confident I become, the less apologetic I have to feel about being who I am in the world.
Right. And, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rick, but I don't see this as hard boundaries. I think it's very, it flows like a river. Yes. I mean, you've got some people that need to consider coming out about being LGBTQ and about mental health issues.
Yep.
There's
no boundaries and there's no here, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. It all kind of melds together. So in my process that I take people through, I call it my 6 C's. And the 6 C's are confusion to curiosity. As you ask the questions in the curiosity phase, you start to become courageous. You start to build the courage to start to talk about who you are, what you are, how you show up in the world. But within that courage, there becomes a commitment piece because you're going to commit to like, okay, I'm finally going to go here. But each of these things kind of builds on each other. So the more courageous you get, the more committed you're like, okay, yes, I can see myself doing this. I can see myself starting to talk about this in certain circles. I can see myself showing up in certain places truly as myself. Well, the more courage and commitment you have, the more confidence you start to have. I'm confidently being me. Okay, this is it. But even if you have all the confidence in the world, it can easily be shattered if you start to falter. And the falter piece is consistency. Consistently showing up as yourself. So I'm going to use Jason as an example. If you don't want to, if you're not going to talk about your bipolar mental health, that's okay. But be consistent about that until you get to a place where you feel like you can consistently do that. But you have to be fully aligned with yourself. Well, how did you get aligned with yourself around that? You asked some questions. You looked at what was confusing about that. You start getting answers. And the more answers you get, the more courageous you become to talking about, here's who I am. And you commit. The commitment part is, why am I doing this? Well, I'm committed to this because I don't want to keep hiding. I'm committed to this because I want people to know the real me. Maybe you're committed to it because you want people to not have the stigma around mental health in this particular arena. I want people to not have the stigma around people being gay. So that's why I talk about it a lot. That's why I open up my doors in so many ways. But I also don't want people to have the stigma, when I've had the opportunities to talk about the stigma of entrepreneurship. What are you doing? Why are you going to quit this really great job and go do this thing? You've got blah, 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 blah. You know, you got a corner office making all this money. Yes, but I'm freaking miserable.
Yeah.
Well, commit to it. You know, have the courage to go do something like that. That answer your question, Jason?
Yeah. Yeah.
So here's a question. I personally believe that stigma can even vary from place to place in the country. For example, I grew up in Long Beach, California, which for at least 20 years has been the largest LGBTQ population in California, not San Francisco. So for me, it was something I ran into, and just it was part of my daily life, you know?
Right.
And now that I live in Southwest Missouri, it's a lot.
It's a whole different ball game. Yep.
It's a whole different ball game.
And that is the interesting piece. So one of the things that I find always kind of fascinates people is they're like, okay, Rick, you live in California. Wow, you must have tons of clients in California. Not really. Just because I live here doesn't mean that's where I'm attracted. The majority of my clients, I'm going to rephrase that. The majority of my US-based clients, they're in the middle states. They're all in the middle part of the country. And I'm not knocking any of that. I'm just saying, you just kind of think through what are the, views and perspectives people have in different parts of the country. And I'm so glad you brought that up, JR, because this happens in every aspect of life. There's just certain things. The more progressive area that you live in, the more understanding, more open people tend to be, whether it's about being gay or your mental health, whether it's about starting a business or, doing the road and doing for 30 years the same thing you're meant to do. It all comes down to how people view things. And again, I'm not knocking any particular area, but having lived in the Southwest and the middle states, I get it. Now, what's interesting is when I lived there, I was a young guy. So this wasn't even on my purview. I was hiding in the closet. I kind of knew there was, this is who Rick was. But even then, there was such a, hate to say it, don't ask, don't tell sort of mentality.
Yeah.
It happens. It's there. Even to this day, I would say, again, not knocking the middle states, but I can honestly say a lot of that is just don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Don't even bring it out of the closet.
And a lot of the stuff in the middle states is just, I guess I use the word ignorance, but what I mean by that is a lack of knowledge.
Lack of knowledge. Yep.
It's not that they're any worse people. They just don't know.
Right. But what's interesting is you can be in a, quote, progressive state. You're going to find the same pockets in a progressive state too.
Of course.
So we live in Central Coast, California, and I can tell you that it's a very interesting space to live as a gay person, not because I feel threatened, but how the gay community shows up here is completely different than how it does, as you said, in Long Beach or San Francisco or San Diego or any of those areas, Palm Springs, because
or even Santa Barbara.
Yeah, totally different. So it's just and I have seen this to your point about how things are viewed from a mental health perspective too. So it's all the same, in so many ways, a similar dynamic.
Right. I agree. Jason, anything else?
Well, I had a couple of questions, but most of them have been answered already. So it's kind of like, wow, kind of got my thunder stolen.
All right. Well, Rick, why don't you tell us a little bit about your 2 podcasts that you do?
Sure. So,
Oh yeah.
When JR and I met, I was already pretty high tilt into Life Uncloseted. It was doing really well. It's morphed and changed throughout the years, but we are approaching 500 episodes. We should hit that mark in January unless something happens. And I love that it has become a very open conversation about the different closets of our lives. It still has a very deep LGBTQ slant to it, but we bring stories in from other walks of life. I just launched one with one of my speaker clients. He does not have, now I got to think about this. I believe he doesn't have a right hand, if I remember right.
Okay.
And he is one of the preeminent kicking coaches for football. He trains kickers how to kick and get those balls through the goalposts. He has worked with NFL and high school and college students. He was very much determined that regardless of his disability, he was going to be something. He played college football. I think he even did get, I'd have to look back at the notes at this point. I believe he did get into the NFL, and then he decided to go this other route. It's a beautiful coming out story about talking about don't let your disability define you. And so that's just one good example of we take things I've interviewed. I interviewed another guy who has been blind since he was 6 years old. He literally, because of a disease in his eyes, had to have his eyes taken out. And he literally about 6 weeks ago was in Tokyo pre-Olympics. There was another event prior to the Olympics where he competed in a marathon for Paralympics. And he does marathon, Ironmans, the whole thing. He swims, he bikes, he runs. And he does that with a partner. So we've had him on the show talking about, what is it like coming out of those closets of your life as a blind person since you were a young man. So I love that podcast because I get to tell so many interesting different stories. We always do bring it back to LGBTQ in some way each month, but that one's every week. The other one came out of a desire to really help men in midlife. It started out as 40 plus Real Men, Real Talk. Had it launched not quite a year when we had the lovely little COVID visitor show up in our world. And I decided right out the gate, you know what? The only way I'm going to keep people connected is not just through the podcast. Let's start having some group chats. And so I launched group chats almost like immediately for both podcasts, and then another one just for the LGBTQ community. And about 2 months into the 40 plus Real Men, Real Talk meetings, so we're doing them once a month, I noticed that all the guys showing up were gay. I'm like, this is really interesting. This podcast isn't positioned as it's just for gay men, right?
Right.
And I'd had quite a few different people on the show and everything, both gay and straight guys. And so finally, by the third month, we're in this meeting, and I'm like, okay, every guy on the Zoom call right now is gay. So I said, guys, I have a question for you. I noticed that everybody here, and I'm not making assumptions because we kind of talked about this, but it seems like everybody here is gay. And I'm just curious, do you guys listen to the podcast? Oh, yeah, we do. But we listen mostly when it's, you talk about the gay stuff. I'm like, well, okay, this is my signal to go back to my roots. So literally before, I think I only had a couple of shows recorded for the upcoming weeks. And I literally made the decision like, you know what, I'm going back to my roots. I'm going to change this thing. I kept part of the name 40 plus, but I changed it to 40 plus gay men, gay talk. And it's doing amazing because it's really, again, focused on a niche. And it's been interesting to watch that podcast grow and grow and grow. Ironically, 90% of those shows are just me. I don't have a guest. Every once in a while I'll have a guest, but it's just me talking about here's what gay men are struggling with. Here's something that I've noticed. Here's some things that come up when I'm coaching people. And it's been really cool. So I feel very fulfilled. I feel in my heart and soul that both those podcasts are truly, they were brought into my world because this is just part of what I'm sitting here on the planet to be doing. So,
yeah. And I will say that I get updated on all this stuff. If you go to rickclemons.com, there is a subscribe button to get some emails and updates on when some of these things are going to happen.
Yep. Yeah. Both of them are happening every month. The podcasts come out weekly. I'm just thrilled to be able to keep doing this. It's one of the joys of the things I get to do in my world. So,
yeah, going back to what you talked about as a certified life coach,
mm-hmm.
I actually went through the same program you did, and I'm getting ready to take my final test.
All right, man. That's awesome.
I really looked at the same things you did. You can go to that one of those 10-hour-long videos kind of courses, but I mean, let's face it, we're talking about people's lives that we're helping them with.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I want to make sure that I had all the training I could get.
I think that's so important that you brought that up, because as I went through the journey myself, what I started noticing was I was getting a lot of guys asking me questions about, hey, how did you do this? What did you do? How did you navigate, conversations with your spouse, with your kids? And that was working. I was like, hey, do this, do that. But then I'm like, you know what? I'm giving advice, and I don't know if that's going to work for them. Right. And so I had a coach at the time, and he had gone through a certification process. And he said, and I said, sometimes I get a little frustrated because I just feel like all I'm doing is giving advice, but I don't feel like I'm getting them to dig into them, to really go into the heart and soul of who they are and what's the reasoning behind this for them. If we went to Simon Sinek world, what's your why behind this? And I had talked to a couple other coaches, and they're like, you really probably should think about getting certified. I'm like, I don't know if I want to do that. And then I'm like, well, maybe I should become a therapist. And then I did look into that, and I actually got it accepted into USC, which was kind of a shock. I'm like, okay, I got accepted. And I'm like, I'm 40 some years old. Do I really want to be going and getting a master's and all this sort of stuff in therapy? And I'm like, that didn't feel right to me.
Right.
And I finally settled into coaching, and I'm like, okay, I think this is the path. And I did two different trains of thought and ended up in the one that you and I both got certified in. And I'm so glad I did, because I have tools available to me. I have questions. Yeah. The process that I built, I can say that it came from me really understanding how valuable processes are to help people navigate through this stuff. And yes, most of the time as a coach, you're in the moment with your client, but I've been doing this so long now. I mean, for those who don't know anything about coaching, from ICF standards, you can become a master certified coach. I have more than enough hours to be considered a master certified coach. I haven't done it because I'm just like, you know what? I don't get asked for the designation, but I believe in it. Be a master certified coach. Now it's lower than what it used to be, but it used to be master certified coach. You had to have 10,000 hours of coaching.
Right.
I'm really excited because I am above that number at this point, which is a huge amount of coaching hours, but it's come from a big combination of individual plus group and everything. But I have a little file folder that I keep right here at the handy when I'm coaching, and all my training stuff is in there. And if somebody says something, I'm like, you know what, let's try something. And I know the program so well that I know exactly where to go grab something and look for it real quick. But without the tools, I don't think you can make the transformation happen.
Right.
And that's the whole point.
I want to bring on real quick Lauren Michaels Harris. He's a gay man from one of those central states that we were just talking about. Yeah. And he grew up in the foster care system. So, he has some things that he can touch on mental health. But I wanted to bring him on to talk to you and to add his 2 cents too.
Excellent.
So how you doing,
Lauren?
Only
2. I brought about 150 cents. I'm kidding.
Oh, okay.
I'm kidding. I'll be happy to give 2.
So, Lauren, please meet Rick. Rick is the coming out coach.
Hi, everyone.
Nice to meet you, man.
Nice to meet you all as well.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about you, Lauren.
Yeah.
Well, I think JR started it off well. I am in the LGBTQ plus community. And as far as, okay, I'm a speaker, I'm a coach, I'm a television show host, I'm an executive producer for the 360 television network, and I am an advocate for foster care reform, things like that. And so I do things like I have a master class out right now, happens to be number 1. Ding of the Bell of Purpose. There it is.
There you go.
And, I'm all about purpose, and I'm all about helping other people get to the places they need to go, hopefully through some of the doors that eluded me for decades, just so that they can get there faster. I believe in helping everyone I can find the most simplistic way to purpose, which in my world, I say it's just looking for the E and the R that you have to slide over to whatever it is you begin your day with. You take great to greater, bright to brighter, strong to stronger, nice to nicer. So we don't need all 26 letters to write our story from day to day. We just need one E and one R, and just keep it moving in an upward and onward fashion. So as far as the LGBT piece, I am a big advocate for coming out and doing it in a way that is comfortable for you as well as those around you, because it doesn't always just involve us, although it is about us, but also, letting people know and things like that. I'm a military veteran. I'm really proud that just right now, currently, I'm the cover on a military magazine, and I'm their very first LGBT cover, and also their first African-American male cover. So, this is new to me. I'm not closeted or anything like that, but I don't, until the last year, I didn't do too much as far as, advocacy out there, within my brands and that sort of thing. But now that's changed because I am also a brand ambassador for an apparel line known as Triple Nickel Combat Veterans, who started this line and wanted to bring awareness to what they, how they used to think. And then suddenly, these are big, combat leaders, blue, what do you call those? Green berets and special forces guys, to the toughest of the tough. But they all find themselves with either a child or a family member or someone close in their world that is LGBT. And so they wanted to show people how they changed their mindset. So I jumped on board and did an entire line of PSAs for Pride Month with them in the Library of Congress. And so, all around the Stonewall moments and things like that. And I, to be honest, didn't even know about the Stonewall story at all at 59 years old now. I did not. So it was a great experience for me. And so, with the foster care thing and speaking from stages and whatnot, I do have kids from time to time, young people, older people even, who ask me these questions about coming out. And I think I was always out. I did the old thing about dating women and all that because I needed to know. I didn't know. I thought some of the things that focused me on the male persona were due to the many abuses, I guess I should say, that I experienced those years in the foster care system. So I didn't know if it was that because I was all broken from that or what. And so I kind of slow rolled it, and back in those early years. And it really, I'll be honest, it really didn't come full circle for me where I was completely freed, untethered, until I met my birth mother at age 32. It took about 2 days of knowing her. Thank you, Lucille. And she just stopped me the second day that we were together and I was leaving her home, and she said, "Oh, before you leave, can I ask you a question?" And I was like, "Sure." I was half in the door and half out. I wish I'd have been all the way out, but thank God I wasn't. And she goes, "What kind of women do you like?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" I feel it trying to trap me. And so
Right.
she said, "No, just what kind?" I said, "Well, what do you mean? Tall, short, skinny, fat? What?" She goes, "What kind?" And I said, "It's all about the person on the inside. It has nothing to do with all that other stuff." And she went, "Okay, I'll see you tomorrow." So the next day I come back And she just happens to be watching Maury Povich. Is it a boy or is it a girl? And so I sit down on the couch next to her, and she's looking at the television, smoking her Virginia Slim. She's like, you know, don't you think everyone deserves to just be able to be and love who they are and who they want? And she looked over at me and I said, yeah. She goes, good. That's good to know. Well, I later found out after I moved in with her a couple months later, came across the videotape, thought, oh, this had some kind of movie on it. I put it in. It was that Maury Povich show. So she had taped it and had it waiting for me, right? So, but what that did for me was she was like maybe a couple months later, I was still dating a woman and all this. And she goes, let me just ask you a question, Lauren. She goes, you're making this way too hard on yourself. And I'm like, what are you talking about? She goes, well, let me just ask you this. 2 questions. If you were with a man and you were happy, do you think you would be tempted to cheat on him with a woman? And before you answer, reverse it. If you were with a woman, do you think you would be tempted to cheat on her with a man? She goes, whichever one is the one where you would not cheat, that's who you should be. Because you need to love and you need to do it authentically, honestly, and with no hidden agendas. It will never work if you do it that way. And all I've ever wanted for you, even all those years we were apart, because you and I were once one person, and that is your happiness. And today I live with and married to my everything. And I don't think it would have happened if she hadn't told me in that one brief moment to give myself permission to be exactly who I am. Because that's the only way to find true happiness. So,
yeah. Well, Lauren, we were just talking a few minutes before you came on about stigmas and parts of the country, and your cities like New York, Chicago, where you live near, Los Angeles, Miami, some of the big cities. It's much easier to come out and to feel accepted. But in a lot of these Midwest states, the thinking is maybe a little backwards sometimes. Do you agree with that?
Well, understandably so. It would be, if you're in a city or an area that's rural and the nearest gay bar is, behind some toxic dump 300 miles away because they try to keep them out of the light of day, it would be difficult. But as an African American man, there's an even tougher nut to crack, because in our communities, for the most part, you don't want that out there because they don't want you there. It's a tough road. So, but who's to say that's any tougher than the Caucasian kid that is living under the roof of a Lutheran pastor in the Bible Belt, or a Christian pastor in the Bible Belt, or a Baptist pastor in the Bible Belt. Take your pick. Right. It's just difficult. And the reason I believe it's still so difficult is because those of us who are out could do better with our desensitizing of everyday people. Everyday people. My husband and I, when we were sitting on the plane yesterday coming from Las Vegas, we were right by the bathroom, in the middle of the plane, where you got to help. If the plane goes down, will you help people get out? We were there. So right in the middle. So we saw people going, and we don't even hesitate holding hands and things like that. When I recorded my album, shameless plug, in 3, 2, 1, when I released my album, Turn It Around, I made sure that there was a song on there, no offenses, which speaks to the day that the Supreme Court made it okay for us to love and live forever, just like everybody else. So, in my own small way, I try to do my part. But now I'm at the point in my life, I'm 59 years old, and I'm happier than I could have ever dreamed. And it's because of being able to be who I am for once. And I don't think it should take anybody 50 some years like it did me to be able to be authentically themselves and authentically, unconditionally happy. So, it is about, if a person is in one of those areas, move to where you can do it. It's never going to work, in my opinion, if you try to hide behind the scenes. Nothing grows in the dark except mold, spores, fungi, and bacteria. And when they want to take care of all those, they just simply slip them in front of a light. So bring it out into the light and let those things that don't belong and don't serve you go where they need to go.
I love what you're saying here, Lauren, because it is one of those things, and I work with people all over the world, but what's so interesting is when I work with somebody who's in some of the middle states there, and they're like, well, but I live in a small town and I don't know how I'm supposed to do this. I'm like, so how are you supposed to live your life if you're not happy? And one of the things that I find most disconcerting is when someone holds themselves into some of these spaces. And since this podcast is about mental health, I don't sometimes believe people understand how damaging they're being to their own mental wellness by saying, well, this is my circumstance. This is all I can do. There's always something more you can do. However, you have to believe it, and you have to believe you can take action against that. And I've had people push back on me on that, but I'm like, if you really, truly want to change your circumstances, you have everything available to you to do it. You just have to believe that you can do it. And I'm not trying to be airy-fairy in those words. I'm trying to be very realistic. I have seen people who have lived in the smallest little towns in the middle of nowhere who finally said, you know what? My happiness is more important than staying in these confines of what somebody else expects me to be. Now, does that mean they went rushing off to WeHo or San Francisco or, New York or wherever? No. But they went and they found a place where they could be, or they changed the way they showed up in their own personal world and trusted that, hey, I'm going to be who I am.
Well, you can't create something that isn't
right
by yourself. We can't do much by ourselves. We can do a lot together, but by ourselves, not so much. But it's just like a person who wants to go to a certain type of university and they don't have it anywhere near. What are you going to do? Just sit there and talk about what you want it to be until it's too late, which is, the upper room, because it's never too late until you're not here. But, you have to go where opportunity lives, you see. And so it takes courage, and so maybe we can all do better. I mean, I don't know if there are, but if not, I'm sure there must be something. But if you're looking to move somewhere or, find pen pals or get in groups or something and start opening the door to opportunity. I am 59 and not one day in my long 59 years has the doorbell ever rang and I opened it up and there was a lot of, people out there waiting to number one, tell me good things about myself, or life sticking its head in saying, I was just passing through. Anybody in here looking for life?
Right.
No, life's not going to come and ask you, out on a date. You got to go out and create that date. If you want it. Now, I will say this, and I'll shut up for a minute or two, is this, here's another thing. Some of us, I'll use myself as an example, didn't realize have not realized yet how we've been treated. Even if we have come out or a little bit, there's a lot of PTSD. I just got 70% service connected 2 months ago, 3 months ago. After all these years, I've been out since I was 24 years old. Did not know that the way they handled me when they found out I was gay was against the law. I did not know it until last year. They went through my file for some unrelated thing, just to check out some things that I had said had gone on. And then they go, well, you do know that you most likely are suffering from PTSD because of the way they treated your openness. And I was like, what? And all this, mishandled. And I really didn't believe anything was going to come from it until I got that ding with all that back pay being deposited. I really didn't believe it because I didn't know it existed. So there's a lot of factors, is my point in bringing that up. That, a lot of people may have, some people confide in someone that think that they could, and then they go and tell everybody. Now they're outed, that sort of a thing. But if people don't know better, they can't do better.
Right.
And so that's why I was excited when JR said he had a coming out coach, because my husband is a therapist and he works with people on that all the time. And it's not easy. I don't think it'll ever be easy.
Well, we were just talking a little bit ago about how, Rick has clients that are working with him as a coming out coach, but also with a therapist.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Because it's valuable to have both sides of the equation working, because sometimes that owning who you are as a gay person is really a deep-seated mental block that needs to be unpacked with a licensed, trained therapist. But then having that coach saying, what is it you want most? How do you want to get there? What is the next steps you want to be taking? How can we create a plan for you as you unpack? And having both things working together is just, it's a beautiful experience. And something that Lauren said that I want to make sure we really don't let be amiss on this is that it doesn't matter the color of your skin or where you live or how old you are. It's the fact of coming and stepping into your truth. And I know, because I have worked with people from all walks of life, and I'm going to lean into, Lauren being a Black man, that is probably one of the hardest places. The Black community, the Asian communities, there are those communities that this is who we are as people, and this is not accepted. It's as heavy duty as those who are deep into a faith place. I just want to make sure that anybody who's listening to this, that they know that it's never, ever, ever too late. The only time it's too late to come out and be yourself is when you can no longer be above ground.
Right. I agree.
Jason,
I agree.
Jason, you have anything you want to add since you've been quiet for a while?
Yeah. One of the my gigs I have going on also, we are a very proud sponsor of Safe Space. And Safe Space is, how during like the 80s and 90s, you had the Safe Space program where if you want to drop your kid off at like a McDonald's or the fire station, you could do so without any prosecution. It was the Safe Space laws. Well, this is kind of like a virtual safe space, to where we're not psychologists, we're not doctors, we're not anything like that. We're not here to give advice, but we're here to listen. And so if a person's going through crisis, we have a lot of resources that they can go to, whether it's a suicide helpline, whether it's to help them find a therapist in their area, stuff like that. There's a lot of great resources that we can just get them plugged into they didn't even know existed. And it's very heavy supported with the LGBTQ plus community, and so it's been I've learned a lot. I've been very, like when you had mentioned Stonewall. I'm actually very familiar with that story because of the Gay Pride Month, and we had learned about it. Just some buddies of mine who are a gay couple who they themselves didn't even know about it, and what it was. And correct me if I'm wrong. Stonewall was a bar in New York. Was that correct?
Yep. Yes.
And it was being hassled a lot by the cops. Cops are going in there, they're busting the place up, they're pulling the liquor license all the time. I mean, just trying to make that place not exist anymore. And finally, people just had it. And it unfortunately turned into a riot, I believe. And it was not what was meant to happen, but things got out of control. And then
people have had enough.
A lot of anger in the neighborhood at the, police were and everything like that but it was a very defining moment that woke up and brought to mainstream television across the country, across the world even, the problems that we were having in our own society, the growing pains that we were going through.
It's a very pivotal point in the LGBTQ world.
It became a movement.
It became the movement, and it became the awareness. Many things in organizations now are alive and thriving because of the Stonewall riots. It started June 28th. Pretty much lasted through July 3rd, ironically, right before July 4th. How interesting is that? Independence Day. But yes, there was, and it was actually my birthday. There we go.
Just saying.
But it also involved a lot of drag queens, cross-dressers who finally said enough is enough, even though it's very much couched in the LGBTQ space. It's kind of like, admitting that without, is it Stacey Abrams in Georgia, right? The black woman who got everybody out to vote. It's almost like the same thing as saying without her, the vote wouldn't have happened. Well, without the drag queens and the gay community in New York City on that day and through that week, I don't know that the LGBTQ community would be who we are today without that uprising that finally occurred.
Well,
so.
And an important part to mention also there, a little addendum that a lot of people don't know, is that one of the things that exposed within our own inner circle, LGBTQ, was that there were still marginalized people inside of the family. Yes. So the lesbians and gay men were booing the drag queens that were up speaking, as if they had not sacrificed, if not more, than those who were out there. They'd lost jobs, they'd been beaten, they'd been all kinds of things. And so, and that's similar to what, we're talking about with mental health, that stigma. It's like an onion. There are people with mental health issues, but they're the ones who, yes, I'm taking this, they have no problem talking about what meds they're on and this and the other, because it's almost like saying, oh, my therapist, almost like a thing, some kind of a banner of some sort. But what I wanted to make sure was presented before we get out of here is this. I know for a fact that, just like finding out just recently about what all those years that I was going through things. I had a 14-year drug addiction come after I got out of the service. I thought it was because of everything that happened in foster care and stuff. I had hopped right over the thing so it was a mental health. I was PTSD still, nonetheless. And what I mean is, most of us have pre-existing mental health issues I did. I had pre-existing mental health issues that were literally blocking my desire to be happy as a gay man. Because I thought, because of other things, I was too damaged, too broken, had too much baggage, all these things, and didn't even realize that they were just simple mental health issues that up and down the street, everybody, I think 100%, has something. Everybody's had a day they were blue. Blue is depression. They got songs about it and everything. Am I blue? Yeah, blue is depressed. So, it shouldn't be like some, scarlet letter. I think people should stop refusing to wear it, even as a temporary tattoo, a piece of, a stick-on felt thing or whatever. You just rip it off, because if you don't, pretty soon you'll have created it, have manifested it into your DNA, believing that there is no other way. So I just want to say, I think that getting in and being true to thine own self, Shakespeare said it best, about the basic things. If you're dealing with anything that is mental health related, get in there and face it. Because if you get it off the table, it's going to bring something else closer to you. Get it off the table, something else is going to, because every time you do that, what is greater than does more. And you can get to that intersection of joy, purpose, and fulfillment, where you know that you deserve everything you see for yourself, everything you believe for yourself. And then the law of attraction can help you where you can't show up for yourself.
What I find interesting to what Lauren just shared, and I think this is kind of an interesting way to kind of tie all this together, Jason and JR, is this intersection of what happens within our own communities. It's still happening. It still happens in the LGBTQ community. There's people within the LGBTQ community who they can't embrace the transgender individuals. They just don't get it. There's people who can't embrace, people who want to be in polyamorous relationships. I'm quite sure in every segment of any community, including the mental health, the autistic, the bipolar communities, all this stuff, there are people within your own communities who can't embrace, well, that's not really, you're depressed. Well, that's not really a mental illness. Okay, well, let's not marginalize the marginalized. We're all in this together. And when I see, especially in our gay community, when I see somebody like, I can't get the transgenders, it's not yours to get. It's just not yours to get.
And also, really quickly, if I could, mental health and mental illness are two different things.
Correct.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
You see, I have physical health and you have physical illnesses. It doesn't become physical health when I have something. It's physical health all the time. That's why people go to the health club. That's why people buy nutritious food. So it's the same thing. But when you get to mental health and you say that, it's like mental illness. What do you got? Ooh, what's wrong? What in the world? So I think it's up to all of us. I can admit mine. Yeah, I've got ADHD, and yeah, they gave me some pills. Do I take them? Not that often, but I do when I can't find anything else to do it. You see, and I did have to learn, and I didn't know there were many different kinds, all these different things. So you got to care enough about yourself to find your truth. And you can only find the truth that connects by knowing the truth that it needs to connect to, which is inside you.
Correct.
So,
well, hey, we just got a couple minutes left, so let's get some shameless plugs out of the way. Lauren, first off, I'm not surprised that you don't take your ADHD medicine very often.
Don't need to. It helps me get this done. I mean, it's a gift. I look at it as a gift. Exactly. I don't care what they say. I didn't even know it was a thing until they told me. It wasn't causing me problem. Yeah, my desk is a mess, but I know this mess. I get so much stuff. This house runs like better than the airport with TSA and all of it. It really does because of that. So it depends on how you embrace whatever it is. Exactly. And you can't go by what they said. I just came from the Star Trek convention speaking because Gene Roddenberry's son, said that the reason, gays in space is there is because when they tried to bring it in, it was either the biracial kiss or the gay thing. And they said, well, don't worry about the gay thing, because by the time the Star Trek years are reality, they will have cured that.
Yeah. Well, hey, Lauren, so let's quickly have you talk about bathrobe moments.
Yep, bathrobe moments, just a safe space. You can see it's unpretentious bathrobe. Coffee and just illuminated conversation, which means it could be the White House chef on Wednesday and someone who's never told their story before on Thursday. Anyone who has lived the truth and is willing to pay it forward to help someone else avoid what they couldn't or wouldn't, then we talk about it. We talk about it and we create a healing space by the truth. I'll never apologize for the truth because it is the only thing in the universe that has never changed on me and will never change. So there it is.
That's right. And that's Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. Central Time.
50 weeks a year.
And across the bottom of your screen, you can see where you can go to watch that. Rick, tell us a little bit about your website. I've got your web link and Facebook page down there, but quickly just go over what you've got going on and how people can best reach you.
Sure. So you can reach everything at rickclemons.com. Got the 2 podcasts, Life Uncloseted and the 40 Plus Gay Men Gay Talk podcast. In addition to that, I do twice a month group chats with gay men that are just coming out of the closet, as well as gay men over 40, to talk about the stuff that us gay men should be talking about but aren't. And we address everything from relationships to suddenly the penis doesn't work and all that sort of stuff. So just join us when you can. Those 2 options are free of charge. We get together, gather, and we really have a great time chatting about that stuff. And would love to see you guys show up and be a part of anything that you can be a part of. Anybody out there?
Yeah, and you can sign up for updates, email updates on these different events at rickclemons.com. And I just want to remind everybody that, it's not just the LGBTQ closet, Rick, that you work with. It's people coming out of closets from all aspects of life.
Mm. Awesome.
Lauren, we were talking earlier, he works with people who have been in the corporate world for 20 plus years and now want to be an entrepreneur.
Oh,
and,
I get those corporate trainers that want to be speakers and they think it's going to be easy. It's totally different. Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So, Rick, anything else that we should know or that places people should go?
Nope, that's it. We're good.
All right.
That's the main
Rick,
place.
I appreciate you so much again for coming on and talking. Lauren, thank you very much.
What about him? Upstairs next to you.
I'm getting ready to do.
Oh, because I'm
we're
trying
ready
to figure out how. I want to invite both of you guys on bathrobe moments. So do what you need to do. Let's so that we can do
Oh
that.
yeah,
Okay.
I definitely would love to.
Okay. Yeah, and Jason and I will be back next Tuesday, 2 p.m. Central, for another edition of Mental Health Happy Hour. And hope everybody has a great week. We'll see you later.
All right.
right.
Thanks so much, JR.